Hello and welcome to today's video. In today's video, you would notice I have like a few books lined up here and over here too. These are all titles I got from a recent haul, which I will be uploading pretty soon. But today is for our Read Aloud series. And since we've completed the last story, which was Hot Money, and we have a wonderful new haul. Obviously, logically, I'm starting a new series. But like this time, I wanted to choose between two titles. Like I want to choose between two titles for our reading today. But before that, in my haul, I got a compact size webster's dictionary. Now it's convenient for us to check out our gains on the spot after reading. We don't need to carry our huge websters. This is compact, this is nice. And I have my pencil case as always with writing materials for anything that sort of jumped out. We usually just focused on vocabulary gains the last series, new words or words that I know, but like I didn't have any specific definition in mind, and it was nice to have that. I feel like this time, I don't know, should we include a pocket, a notepad, so that we could, maybe write something out. I don't know. Probably not. Depends on how it goes. But first of all, we have to choose a story, like a book to read. This is a title by an African writer. So it is Weep Not Child by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I don't think there's a clear cut summary here, but what is written here, above all, in Njoroge wanted to become educated like the son of the rich farmer Jacobo, who had finished all the learning in Kenya and would now go to England. Ngoto's father worked for Mr. Howland, the white settler from England, and both in their different ways felt the same powerful love for the rich earth they farmed. When Jomo was arrested and the state of emergency declared, it made very little difference. Arrested and tortured, Njoroge's brothers left to go to the big city or to join freedom fighters in the forest. Gradually, all the family was joined in the struggle and what became a day-to-day tragedy. Okay, so I don't think this is a very. It's filled with errors. So I think to get an idea of what the story is about, it's just saying that first of all, this story is about Kenya under colonial masters, and Kenya with experience, like with the rebellion, Kenya with the rebellion struggling for independence, that sort of thing, and the middle ground, that happens in such extreme, either being part of the colonial masters or being, not as if anybody has a choice to be part or not part of them, in colon colonial days, in the colonial era of most African countries, you don't have a choice. So, but there are also rebellions, rebellious forces that, you know, seek to overthrow colonial government and systems like in those days. And so in the middle ground are the people just trying to survive, you get like trying to so I feel like we're going to have to wade through all of that, meds focused on a particular family, but that is just what I pieced apart from the summary. So either we take this, it says with introduction and notes by Ikide. So this is probably important. The illustration is very cool. Also, you can pick apart this um image of a man in scribbles and his eyes all shadowed and everything. It doesn't look like a man that is alright. So the second pick is Richard Yates' Revolutionary Road. And just off the bat, you know, I mentioned it in my whole video, but that just off the bat, from his name alone, I felt like okay, I mistook him for that poet William Butler Yeats. And then later when I got home, I was like, okay, this is not the Yeats that I was looking for because I was interested in poetry books. But this is not the Yeats. But either ways, I saw this review by Kurt Vonnegut on its back. The Great Gatsby of My Time, one of the best books by a member of my generation. So I was like, and you know how Kurt Vonnegut, like his quotes really helped me bring together a past video, like the video I posted a few days back about writing and writing advice, all of that. So I was like, okay, if Kurt Vonnegut is reviewing this book, that means there's something, interesting for me to see in this story. So the summary goes, from the moment of its publication in 1961, Revolutionary Road was hailed as a masterpiece of realistic fiction and as the most evocative portrayal of the opulent desolation of the American suburbs. So it's set in America. It's the story of Frank and April Wheeler, a bright, beautiful, and talented couple who have lived on the assumption that greatness is only just around the corner. With heartbreaking compassion and remorseless clarity, Richard Yates shows how Frank and April mortgaged their spiritual birthright, betraying not only each other but their best selves. So this is very interesting because now when you look at the cover, you see a supposed house and this person, this man and this woman, maybe they are a couple or something, but they are inside a bottle that is sealed by a wooden cork. So and like, but the bottle is transparent, so it's like there whatever is going on in this trapped um ecosystem, it is very visible to the rest of the world around them. So I feel I was like, okay, when I saw the tagline, that's one of the things I was like, okay, I'm going to read this book earlier than the rest. And then yesterday, like last night, I found out that this book had been made. I got these books on what, Friday last week, and then I found out last night that this book was made into a movie. And I think the main character, Frank Wheeler, was played by Leonardo DiCaprio. Mm. And I found this out when I was watching a Shakespeare video essay, which is very, very interesting. It's like, wow, all these things coming together. So because of that, because there are so many, I don't know, connections, I feel like I'm going to go with Richard Yates' Revolutionary Road. But then again, I'm just feeling it out so that like I might stop halfway if I'm not feeling it so much. But let us get on with it. As usual, I read just two chapters. Should we read the reviews? There are several. There's a page for the reviews here. Here, so Richard Yates, Revolutionary Road, from the New Republic. Every phrase reflects to the highest degree integrity and stylistic mastery. To read Revolutionary Road is to have forced upon us a fresh sense of our critical modern shortcomings, failures of work, education, community, family, marriage, and plain nerve. From the Saturday Review, Richard Yates is a writer of commanding gifts. His prose is urbane yet sensitive, with passion and irony held deftly in balance, and he provides unexpected pleasures in a flood of freshly minted phrases and a thrust of sudden insight, precise notations, and modern on sentimental perception. Actually, I will not start from here. What does modern mean? And from finally from Tennessee Williams, here is more than fine writing. Here is what added to the fine writing makes a book come immediately, intensely, and brilliantly alive. If more is needed to make a masterpiece in modern American fiction, I am sure I don't know what it is. So really high praise for this author. Mm, mostly for the book, and then the authors like like when you do something like when like I imagine like when a writer writes so well. The book is the story is first of all impressed upon, you know, you as a reader first before you now come into awareness of, oh, the person that wrote this is actually pretty awesome. Like not pretty awesome as in um personality wise, or no, it's pretty awesome to for bringing the story to life. So I don't know why I'm saying all of that, but yeah. Also by Richard Yates, 11 Kinds of Loneliness, A Special Providence, Disturbing the Peace, The Easter Parade, A Good Scholars in Love, Young Hearts Crying, Cold Spring Harbor. So I'm really interested in reading 11 Kinds of Loneliness. Let's go ahead. And first page just says the dedication just goes to Sheila. That's what is here. Cool. And then opening further, you see a quote from John Keats. Alas, when passion is both meek and mild. I've been noticing a theme here of him emphasizing two opposites in meaning words or terms and making them unite to bring one feeling from something. But like I'm just so times. So the way this thing is going to go, this book is like I don't know how many chapters. How many chapters? Okay, I'm seeing this is chapter 6. Look at how much content is there between 1 and 6. So I don't think we're going to go. I think I'm just going to go based on how I feel, reading. So it won't be, oh, every week we do 2 chapters or 1 chapter. It's just going to be on the feels of it, how I'm interested in the story progressing. And also Webster's here, our pen here. Get cozy as we start chapter 1. The final dying sounds of their dress rehearsal left the Laurel players with nothing to do but stand there, silent and helpless, blinking out over the footlights of an empty auditorium. They hardly dared to breathe as the short, solemn figure of the director emerged from the naked seats to join them on stage as he pulled a step ladder raspingly. Maybe you should know what raspingly means. As he pulled a stepladder raspingly from the wings and climbed halfway up its rungs to turn and tell them with several clearings of his throat that they were a damn talented group of people and a wonderful group of people to work with. It hasn't been an easy job, he said, his glasses glinting soberly around the stage. We've had a lot of problems here, and quite frankly, I'd more or less resigned myself not to expect too much. Well, listen, maybe this sounds corny, but something happened up here tonight. Sitting out there tonight, I suddenly knew deep down that you were all putting your hearts into your work for the first time. He let the fingers of one hand splay out across the pocket of his shirt to show what a simple thing the heart was. Then he made the same hand into a fist which he shook slowly and wordlessly in a long dramatic pause, closing one eye and allowing his moist lower lip to curl out into a grimace of triumph and pride. Do that again tomorrow night, he said, and we'll have one hell of a show. They could have wept with relief. Instead, trembling, they cheered and laughed and shook hands and kissed one another. And somebody went out for a case of beer and they all sang songs around the auditorium piano until the time came to agree unanimously that they'd better knock it off and get a good night's sleep. See you tomorrow, they called, as happy as children, and riding home under the moon they found they could roll down the windows of their cars and let the air in with its health-giving smells of loam and young flowers. It was the first time many of the Laurel players had allowed themselves to acknowledge the coming of spring. The year was 1955 and the place was a part of western Connecticut where three swollen villages had lately been merged by a wide and clamorous highway called Route 12. The Laurel Players were an amateur company, but a costly and very serious one, carefully recruited from among the younger adults of all three towns, and this was to be their maiden production. All winter, gathering in one another's living rooms for excited talks about Ibsen and Shaw and O'Neill, and then for the show of hands in which a common sense majority chose the petrified forests, and then for preliminary casting, they had felt their dedication growing stronger every week. They might privately consider their director a funny little man, and he was, in a way. He seemed incapable of any but a very earnest manner of speaking, and he would often conclude his remarks with a shake of the head, with a little shake of the head that caused his cheeks to wobble. But they liked and respected him, and they fully believed in most of the things he said. Any play deserves the best that any actor has to give, he had told them once. And another time, remember this, we're not just putting on the play here, we're establishing a community. We're establishing a community theatre, and that's a pretty important thing to be doing. Any play deserves the best that any actor has to give. The trouble was that from the very beginning they had been afraid they would end by making fools of themselves, and they had compounded that fear by being afraid to admit it. At first, their rehearsals had been held on Saturdays. Always, it seemed, on the kind of windless February or March afternoon when the sky is white, the trees are black, and the brown fields and hummocks of the earth lie naked and tender between curds of shriveled snow. The players, coming out of their various kitchen doors and hesitating for a minute to button their coat or pull on their gloves, would see a landscape in which only a few very old weathered houses seemed to belong. It made their own homes look as weightless and impermanent, as foolishly misplaced as a great many bright new toys that had been left outdoors overnight and rained on. Their automobiles did not look right either, unnecessarily wide and gleaming in the colors of candy and ice cream, seeming to wince at each splatter of mud. They crawled apologetically down the broken road that led from all directions to the deep level slab of Route 12. Once there, the car seemed able to relax in an environment all their own, a long bright valley of coloured plastic and plate glass and stainless steel, King Kong, mobile gas, Shoporama, it. But eventually they had to turn off one by one and make their way up the winding country road that led to the Central High School. They had to pull up and stop in the quiet parking lot outside the high school auditorium. Hi, the players would shyly call to one another, hi, hi, and they would go reluctantly inside, clumping their heavy galoshes around the stage, blotting at their nose with Kleenex, and frowning at the unsteady print of their scripts. They would they would disarm each other at last with peals of forgiving laughter, and they would agree over and over that there was plenty of time to smooth the thing out. But there wasn't plenty of time, and they all knew it, and a doubling and redoubling of the rehearsal schedule seemed only to make matters worse. Long after the time had come for what the director called really getting this thing off the ground, really making it happen, it remained a static, shapeless, inhumanly heavy weight. Time and again they read the promise of failure in each other's eyes, in the apologetic nods and smiles of their parting, and the spastic haste with which they broke for their cars and drove home to whatever older, less explicit promises of failure might lie in wait for them there. And now, tonight, with 24 hours to go, they had somehow managed to bring it off. Giddy in the unfamiliar feel of makeup and costumes on this first warm evening of the year, they had forgotten to be afraid. They had let the movement of the play come and carry them and break like a wave. And maybe it sounded corny, and what if it did? But they had all put their hearts into their work. Could anyone ever ask for more than that? The audience, arriving in a long, clean serpent of cars the following night, were very serious too. Like the players, they were mostly on the young side of middle age, and they were attractively dressed in what the New York clothing stores described as country casuals. Anyone could see that they anyone could see they were a better than average crowd in terms of education and employment and good health. It was clear too that they considered this a significant evening. They all knew, of course, and said so again and again as they filed inside and took their seats, that the Petrified Forest was hardly one of the world's great plays, but it was, after all, a fine theatre piece with a basic point of view that was every bit as valid as today as in the 30s. In parentheses, even more valid, one man kept telling his wife, who chewed her lips and nodded, saying what he meant. Even more valid when you think about it. The main thing, though, was not the play itself, but the company, the brave idea of it, the healthy, hopeful sound of it, the birth of a really good community theatre right here among themselves. This was what had drawn them, enough of them to fill more than half the auditorium, and it was what held them hushed and tense, in readiness for pleasure as the house light dimmed. The curtain went up on a set whose rear wall was still shaking with the impact of the stagehand's last minute escape, and the first few lines of dialogue were blurred by the scrape and bang of accidental off-stage noises. These small disorders were signs of a mounting hysteria among the laurel players, but across the footlights they seemed only to add a sense of impending excellence. They seemed to say engagingly, "Wait a minute, it hasn't really started yet. We're all a little nervous here, but please bear with us." And soon there was no further need for apologies, for the audience was watching the girl who played the heroine, Gabrielle. Her name was April Wheeler, and she caused the whispered word "lovely" to roll out over the auditorium the first time she walked across the stage. A little later, there were hopeful nudges and whispers of "she's good," and there were stately nods of pride among the several people who happened to know that she had attended one of the leading dramatic schools of New York less than 10 years before. She was 29, a tall ash blonde with a patrician kind of beauty that no amount of amateur lighting could distort, and she seemed ideally cast in her role. It didn't even matter that bearing two children had left her a shade too heavy in the hips and thighs, for she moved with the shyly sensual grace of maidenhood. Anyone happening to glance at Frank Wheeler, the round-faced, intelligent-looking young man who sat biting his fist in the last row of the audience, would have said he looked more like her suitor than her husband. "Sometimes I can feel as if I were sparkling all over," she was saying, "and I want to go out and do something that's absolutely crazy and marvelous." Backstage, huddled and listening, the other actors suddenly loved her, or at least they were prepared to love her, even those who had resented her occasional lack of humility at rehearsals, for she was suddenly the only hope they had. The leading man had come down with a kind of intestinal flu that morning. He had arrived at the theatre in a high fever, insisting that he felt well enough to go on, but 5 minutes before curtain time he had begun to vomit in his dressing room, and there had been nothing for the director to do but send him home and take over the role himself. The thing happened so quickly and nobody had the time to think of going out front to announce the substitution. A few of the minor actors didn't even know about it until they heard the director's voice out there in the light, speaking the familiar words they had expected to hear from the other man. He was doing his fervent best and delivering each line with his high semi professional finish. But there was no denying that he looked all wrong in the part of Alan Squares, squat and partly bowed, and all but unable to see without his glasses, which he refused to wear on stage. From the moment of his entrance, he had caused the supporting actors to interrupt each other and forget where to stand, and now, in the middle of his important first act speech about his own futility. Yes, brains without purpose, noise without sound, shape without substance. One of his gesturing hands upset a glass of water that flooded the table. He tried to cover it with a giggle and a series of improvised lines. You see, that's how useless I am. Here, let me help you wipe it up. But the rest of the speech was ruined. The virus of calamity, dormant and threatening all these weeks, had erupted now and spread from the helplessly vomiting man until it infected everyone in the cast but April Wheeler. Wouldn't you like to be loved by me? She was saying. Yes, Gabrielle, said the director, gleaming with sweat. I should like to be loved by you. You think I'm attractive? Under the table, the director's leg began to jiggle up and down on the spring of its flexed foot. There are better words than that for what you are. Then why don't we at least make a start at it? She was working alone and visibly weakening with every line. Before the end of the first act, the audience could tell, as well as the players, that she had lost her grip. And soon they were all embarrassed for her. She had begun to alternate between forced theatrical gestures and a white-knuckled immobility. She was carrying her shoulders high and square, and despite her heavy makeup, you could see the warmth of humiliation rising in her face and neck. Then came the bouncing entrance of Shep Campbell, the burly young red-haired engineer who played the gangster, Dukmanti. The whole company had worried about Shep from the beginning, but he and his wife Millie, who had helped with the props and publicity, were such enthusiastic and friendly people that nobody had had the heart to suggest replacing him. The result of this indulgence now, and of Campbell's own nervous guilt about it, was that he forgot one of his key lines and said others in a voice so quick and faint that it couldn't be heard beyond the sixth row, and handled himself less like an outlaw than an obliging grocery clerk, bobbing head, rolled up sleeves and all. At intermission, the audience straggled out to smoke and wander in uncomfortable groups around the high school corridor, examining the high school bulletin board, and wiping damp palms down their slim cut trousers and their graceful cotton skirts. None of them wanted to go back and go through with the second and final act, but they all did. And so did the players, whose one thought now, as plain as the sweat on their faces, was to put the whole sorry business behind them as fast as possible. It seemed to go on for hours, a cruel and protracted endurance test in which April Wheeler's performance was as bad as the others, if not worse. At the climax, where the stage directions called for the poignance of the death scene to be punctuated with shots from the outside and bursts from Duke's Tommy gun, Shep Campbell timed his burst so sloppily, and the answering upstage gunfire was so much too loud that all the lovers' words were lost in a deafening smoking shambles. When the curtain fell at last, it was an act of mercy. The applause, not loud, was conscientiously long enough to permit two curtain calls, one that caught all the players in motion as they walked to the wings, turned back, and collided with one another, and another that revealed the three principals in a brief tableau of human desolation. The director blinking myopically, Shep Campbell looking appropriately fierce for the first time all evening, April Wheeler paralyzed in a formal smile. Then the house lights came up, and nobody in the auditorium knew how to look or what to say. The uncertain voice of Mrs. Helen Giddens, the real estate broker, could be heard repeating, "Very nice," over and over again. But most of the people were silent and stiff, fingering packs of cigarettes as they rose and turned to the aisles. An efficient high school boy, hired for the evening to help with the lights, vaulted up onto the stage with a squeak of his sneakers and began calling instructions to an unseen partner high in the flies. He stood posing self-consciously in the footlights, managing to keep most of his bright pimples in shadow while proudly turning his body to show that the tool of the electrician's trade, knife, pliers, coils of wire, were slung in a professional-looking holster of oiled leather and one low on one tense buttock of his dungarees. Then the bank of lights clicked off. The boy made a pale exit, and the curtain became a dull wall of green velvet, faded and streaked with dust. There was nothing to watch now but the masked faces of the audience as they pressed up the aisles and out of the main doors. Anxious, brown-eyed two by two, they looked and moved as if a calm and orderly escape from this place had become the one great necessity of their lives, as if in fact they wouldn't be able to begin to live at all until they were out beyond the rumbling pink billows of exhaust and the crunching gravel of this parking lot, out where the black sky went up and up forever, and there were hundreds of thousands of stars. I think I'm going to keep this phrase, as if in fact they wouldn't be able to begin to live at all until they were out beyond the rumbling pink billows of exhaust and the crunching gravel of this parking lot, out where the black sky went up and up forever, and there were hundreds of thousands of stars. I feel like it's kind of a play on these very painfully amateurish, you know, wannabes and the already established professional celebrities or stars in that sense. So there were a few words I got, and I think it's chapter one is where we'll stop. Mm, we have somehow met April Wheeler and Frank Wheeler, you know, from an outside perspective in a neutral situation. Neutral being she's doing her job, not a job, but like she's performing, okay, and her husband is watching her in the audience. So yeah, there is no view of them, from each other's point of view. And I feel like because we are just we just got introduced to them as outsiders, which is as neutral as can be. So anyway, our vocabulary gains. Like, what did you think of chapter one so far? I wonder. For me, it's just I've read chapter one already, so my feelings on it. Although now I'm reading it again, it's not the same feeling I had the first time I read this chapter, which was like I got the book on Friday, yeah. So like I think Sunday or yes, Sunday evening, yes. I read this chapter. It was comedic to me on Saturday. It was comedic to me because I was like, imagine coming from the point of view, somehow when you practice, it's always like better than when you actually perform it. I mean, rehearsals usually go sometimes way better than performance, like in K-pop now, a lot of people release rehearsals and all of that. Like when you now watch the rehearsals, you enjoy, what you see and even what you saw on stage. So I don't know, coming from that aspect, the framing of it, like how hopeful and enthusiastic and like their judgment of their own play, like the director's judgment of their performance and everything, and I believed in them in that sense. I was like, oh, okay, like oh, something corny, like the director mentioned that it might be corny and what of it, all of that, and I was like, I don't care about corny. I like when people perform, with all of their heart, and I was like, oh, this is going to be wonderful, especially since it's a what do you call this, a launch. It's not really a launch, but like what do you call it? A debut, a debut of their community theater, which they are intentionally um, putting together. So I was like, yes, there's nothing wrong with being corny for your debut and all of that, but to now go so seamlessly into how horribly it turned out, and it's not even turning out horribly in the focus of oh they didn't do well or something. It's just like a mechanical failure, and a mechanical failure, I can't blame, you can't blame everything, any one person, is a mechanical failure. So that means the system of it, you know, fell apart, you know, fell apart, and it happened right on stage. Like, because they started off saying April Villa was lovely from her very first line, and I was like, okay, 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 she's going to save the show or save the play, sorry. But for them to just like for the balloon to just deflate so horribly, that the audience just could have to run away, like they just wanted to leave. Ah god, it was comedic to me, it was funny. So the very first word is rasping. R rasp as a verb, as in that is rasping to scrape or rub with coarse file to utter the definition to utter something in a rough grating voice, kind of like how my voice has been sounding. So stepladder, he moved the stepladder raspingly from the wings. So rasp here is to describe the sound of the stepladder. So the next word is hummocks. I have this worry that the words here might be limited. Hummock, a noun, a rounded knoll or hill of snow or dirt, and the context is describing the environment actually. When the sky is white, the trees are black, and the brown fields and hummocks of the earth lie naked and tender between coils of shriveled snow. So, context. Spastic. Spastic. Oh, spastic. Spastic. There is spasm, but there is no spastic. So I feel like spasm is an involuntary muscle contraction. So I feel like there's no word for spastic here. There's no spastic here, but I feel like we can infer what spastic means from spasm. Anyway, I'd like to underline this phrase. Um, drove home, drove home to whatever older, less explicit promises of failure might lie in wait for them there. Is interesting because this implies that the play, whatever they are doing in the theater, whatever they are practicing, rehearsing, is going to be a fresh, a younger, or a newer, yes, a fresh, a newer, much, much more explicit promise of failure. Like I should have even seen that. Wow, okay. The next word is patrician. Used to describe April, their main girl. Heard this word patrician like a lot, but I felt like I could infer the meaning, but I want to have a very clear definition of it. So Patricia, I'm afraid it might not be here. Definition is not here. Okay, so I realize how limited this dictionary might be. Okay, if we can't find a word here, we'll just pay it forward to the next video when we have our big ass dictionary with us, because I can't be dealing with this. Let's see if struggled. We'll be able to find the word struggled here. I bought this thing for convenience, but do you know how inconvenient it is to look for something in the dictionary? You can't find it. Very, very inconvenient and irritating. Struggled. Bro, it is not here. It is okay. I will kick this dictionary and throw it over somebody's house. Like, this is how annoying. Okay, will tableau be here? Will poignance be here? Let's check. Let's find out. Oh, poignance. There is poise, but there is no poignance. Why? Should have guessed. Here. Should I even bother looking for tableau? Let's see. Let's just make sure that it's not here. Tableau. I should have gotten something else, to be honest. Hallelujah. Tableau is here. A vivid representation, a stage scene represented by motionless and silent people who stand in an appropriate arrangement. So, in the context of it, wow. Context of it, and another that revealed three principles in a brief tableau of human desolation. Three. So that's uh according to this is an arrangement, a human arrangement, trying to bring out something. So this is a tableau of human desolation, and the three principals, which is the director, is also played the leading man, blinking myopically, and Shep Campbell, who was supposed to be the villain or the antagonist, I think, looking appropriately fierce for the first time all evening. Instead of applying that look to the show, to the play, and then April Wheeler paralyzed in a formal smile. At least there are no more words to. That has been this week's reading, chapter 1. Do we like it? Are we feeling it? Or should we read Weep Not Child, the first chapter of it, and decide which one it is to continue for this new series of reading, like Read Aloud that we started? I feel like we should give Weep Not Child a chance, like as in chapter 1 in the next video, so that I don't know, so we'll know. Yeah, maybe next video we're going to read like the start of Weep Not Child, and then we'll decide which one we're gonna go along with. But anyway, thank you for being here. Thank you for being here. Bye.